Ladies and gentlemen, the e-seminar starting. Paul, please go ahead.
Thank you, George, and hi, everybody. Welcome to Time to Value. Conquer your app backlog and bring mobile solutions to market faster. It's an e-seminar presented by IBM. My name is Paul Gillen, and I will be your host and moderator. And in a moment, we'll hear from Howard Cohen, Senior Resultant with the Tech Channel Partners Results Group, and also from Ken Parmalee, Product Strategy Program Director for IBM Worldwide Mobile First Division. But first, a little housekeeping. During the webcast, slides will be pushed to your screen automatically. If you want to view the presentation full screen, look for the small green Maximize button at the top right of the window. You can also drag the corner of the presentation window to change its size. You'll also see some widgets along the bottom of the console. Click on the green Download Slides widget to access the presentation in PDF format. IBM has also made a variety of educational content available, and we'll show you the links to that content at the end of today's presentation. Now, after our speakers finish their prepared remarks, they'll field your questions. You can submit a question by typing it into the text box on your webcast console and clicking the Submit button. Our speakers will either answer your question in the Q&A portion of the webcast or personally in an email to follow. Be sure to get your questions in early, by the way, so that we do get to them during the live e-seminar. So now, let's move on to today's topic. It wasn't too long ago that mobile apps were a nice-to-have for most organizations, but today they're essential for any business that needs employees or customers to access critical services. Half of all web browsing activity now occurs on mobile devices, and as a result, service providers and IT organizations are struggling with a huge backlog of applications that need to be made mobile-friendly. That process isn't as simple as it was in the early days. Many of those first mobile apps, you'll remember, were basically modifications of existing HTML web pages. But today, users want a more focused, efficient, and responsive experience, and they want to combine mobile features like phone, camera, and GPS. They want to be able to integrate with other apps on their mobile device. Organizations are also paying greater attention than ever to security and management issues, given the criticality of mobile apps to the business. All of this adds considerable complexity to the development process and also demands more attention to upfront design. IBM's integrated mobile-first solutions provide a comprehensive set of tools for developing mobile applications that are optimized for each use case scenario. In this e-seminar, you'll first hear from Howard Cohen, Senior Resultant at the Tech Channel Partners Results Group. He'll describe the evolving mobile landscape and the challenges corporations and service providers are trying to solve. And maybe he'll tell us what a senior resultant is. He'll be followed by Ken Parmalee, Director of Product Strategy at IBM Mobile First. Ken will introduce you to the extensive range of products and services that IBM brings to the market. A little bit about Howard. He has more than 30 years of IT channel experience. He consults, presents, and writes extensively on IT topics, including virtualization, infrastructure, cloud, and management. He's written for many major tech journals. He's a displaced New Yorker living in the deserts of Arizona right now and loving it. Howard, take it away.
Thank you, Paul. Just to answer your first question, senior resultant, pretty simple. Senior suggests that maybe I'm kind of old. And resultant is really a play on the word results. When I grew up in the IT channel, we came to understand that results speak, nothing else does. And so these days I'm very busily trying to help clients and readers get better results. And we're going to do that today, I hope. Did you ever ask yourself the question about why all the manufacturers keep coming out with tablet devices of all kinds of different sizes? One is 5 inches, the next one's 8 inches, then 7 inches, 9.2 inches, 10.4. What they're trying to do is figure out what is exactly the right size, the size that everybody will like for everything, so that they can satisfy everybody's desire to carry just one device. Because ultimately that's what they believe everybody wants. Let me just carry one device that I can use for everything: telephone, writing documents, browsing the web, computing with spreadsheets, so forth and so on. So embedded in that message is the message that mobile is quickly becoming the new normal. People want to be able to go mobile. They want 2-in-1 devices, tablet and laptop, hybrid devices that do it all, phablets. There's plenty of words that are coming out for it, but the bottom line is they want one device on which they can live, work, and play. There are a lot of drivers for this. First of all, network access has never been faster. There is better and better 4G coverage. There will be better 5G, 6G, 10G, and so forth coverage as we move forward. But again, people want the ability to do everything. with the one device. They don't want to have to switch back and forth. They don't want to have to transfer files. They simply want to be able to do whatever they want to do. And with millions of apps in the marketplace, we're quickly approaching the time when that can happen. From the perspective of the app developer, it's a growing market, a burgeoning market. It's exploding all over the place. There are literally billions of available customers now. It's easier to get a new app product to market than ever before. We've seen new app development platforms that end up depositing your app right into a marketplace or multiple marketplaces. The good news, bad news is that the cost of entry has gotten lower, which means that we're going to see a glut of small, poorly developed, poorly backed apps out there for a while until the market does what it does and pushes those lower quality apps out of the market. There's also currently minimal monitoring of quality or acceptability of the apps. You'll notice when you visit your favorite app store that there are many apps there that don't really function as advertised. The ratings are horrible. You wonder how they managed to get that on the App Store, and that's a really good question that hopefully we'll find better answers for as we go ahead. But just as there are drivers in the consumer marketplace, there are also several drivers in the corporate marketplace that are driving the development of more and more applications for corporate users. One is that people have noticed that native apps increase productivity dramatically, native apps. An app that has been written specifically for the device it's running on. We've all seen browser versions of apps that were meant to run on a full-sized desktop computer screen, and now they've been reduced down to the handheld size. So the problem, of course, is you find yourself zooming and panning and tilting all around the application. It becomes very difficult to navigate. It became obvious that writing an app specifically for the device with nice big buttons to accommodate our nice big fat American fingers was a much better idea than trying to use the desktop version on a smaller screen. We've also seen a lot of bring-your-own-device initiatives. At first, people thought that would be unpopular. The fact of the matter is it's become unbelievably popular. There are cases of corporation after corporation that have observed that their personnel are happy to put in more time and do more work when they can do it whenever and wherever they are. People are doing work during their commute to and from work. They're doing work at the breakfast table while they're having their morning coffee. And if they can work on the device that they're accustomed to, that they're comfortable with, and that is with them, they're happy to work. So BYOD has become very, very popular. Also, people who work together have found it far easier to work together when everybody's using cloud-based collaboration software from their mobile devices. And they can work on a document together rather than having to pass it around from person to person to person to person. Also, people who are out in the field either creating sales or collecting data for various surveys or other kinds of analyses absolutely love having a device with them on which they can collect the data directly. Use the camera in the device to collect photographic evidence of whatever it is they're studying. Use a very convenient on-screen set of buttons to enter information from a variety of different things that they're testing. So collecting data, the closer you are to where the data is, where it's occurring, the better. And people are finding more and more facility in doing that. There are, however, many mobile application development imperatives that we do have to observe. It's important that if we're going to develop mobile applications, that we're able to develop them, test them, and bring them to market quickly. The faster we can get to market, the faster we can achieve a competitive advantage in the marketplace. If we're using our app a month or two before our competitors are using their app, obviously we've got a 1 or 2 month jump on them. At the same time, we have to balance that off with prudence. Some people have been skipping user acceptance testing. They just put the application out there and hope for the best. Big mistake. User acceptance testing definitely takes time, but you save that time back in reduced error correction in the field. When you have to go out and fix a broken app or redistribute a broken app, you are losing time. So the user acceptance testing, an ounce of user acceptance testing, may indeed be worth a pound of cure. We're finding also, especially in the world of BYOD, where people are picking and choosing whatever device they want to bring, that at the very least the three major platforms, Android, iOS, and Windows Phone, have got to be included in the selection of devices that you're developing your native apps for. Now, some will argue that BlackBerry is still in that group, and that's fine. Others will probably just as quickly argue that Windows Phone, with only 8.2% of the market, is not in that group. Microsoft would probably argue differently. Android, certainly because it runs on so many different devices, has got the lion's share of the market. But Apple, of course, controls quality by controlling hardware and software, and the iPhone is still an incredibly popular entry. So when you develop a native app, you really need to develop the native app for multiple devices, and not doing so will let you out of the running in a BYOD environment. Also, data synchronization must be flawless. If you can't get the data back to your corporate back-end applications, what is the point? So that technology has got to be in place. You know, many people don't recognize that big data has grown up not because we can analyze more data. It's grown up because we can collect massively more data. When you think about all the ways we have now, all the sensors that are in place in digital signage in retail stores, in the toll booths on major highways, there are so many ways of collecting millions and billions of data points that the amount of data is what has created the big data phenomenon. The ability to analyze it is somewhat trailing that, but we're sure it'll catch up. Here are some more imperatives when developing applications for mobile devices. Every corporate shop has a backlog. No matter how big your app dev team is, it seems that your corporate users can outdistance them in making requests faster than they can possibly fulfill them. Now it becomes even more difficult because no longer are any of these people trying to port applications from a desktop platform to a mobile platform. That's not happening anymore. Now everybody is, quote-unquote, reimagining their applications and redeveloping them specifically for the mobile platform as a native app. It takes much more time, much more productive when the users start using it, but it takes more time to reimagine, redesign, recode, retest the application on the new platforms than it does to simply port code from one to the other. Very important to consider. The most important consideration in delivering any new application is user adoption. Very simply put, if users don't adopt, you don't have a new application. It's not working until people use it. So the native apps, because they're so much easier to use, because the buttons are so much more accommodating, because they're designed to logically move through the workflow of the application, they're much more popular than having to navigate around in a browser and having to tilt and pan and zoom, and people don't like that. Users don't adopt that. They do adopt native apps, and dramatically so. So another reason why it's important, imperative, to be developing native apps for your users. Literally, poor user adoption is not an option. Of course, if it were that we could just simply create that mobile app and we're done, we're ready to go, that would be wonderful. But the reality is that a mobile app is completely dependent upon its connection to all of your back-end systems. You have back-end ERP systems, you have back-end CRM systems, other information management systems. Your front-end mobile app has to be able to package and transfer data that can be readily consumed by the APIs on your back-end systems. So your mobile app has to be enterprise-ready for integration with those systems. Security has to be baked in at every level. Security is by no means an option. It must be a secure path from that vulnerable mobile device out there in the field back to your corporate back-end systems and on into the reports that your corporate executives use to make better decisions. And just as security must be baked in, compliance must be baked in. Neither of these are easy, and the two are not the same. Just because you're secure does not mean you're fully compliant, and just because you're fully compliant does not mean that you're necessarily completely secure. Both must be approached separately. Both must be addressed individually. And when you've got both in place, then and only then can you feel comfortable putting your applications out in the field, especially if you're subject to governmental regulation. At the end of the day, user adoption is all about the user experience. So you can't be developing your applications in a vacuum. You have to be developing your applications with the user's experience in mind. What's it going to feel like for a user to use your app? They expect mobile apps to all work similarly. The way that every other app they're used to working, your app needs to work that way, otherwise they'll be confused. This is not different from laptop or desktop applications. You know, there's been a lingua franca of user interface for decades now, and there are tacit standards. This is what people expect. And the more you can get closer to what they expect, the more likely it is they'll adopt and use the application, especially when the device is their device. As far as they're concerned, it's their device. It should work the way they expect it to work. And this is not an overt hostile attitude on the part of users. This is a built-in endemic part of the reality of being a user. It's just a natural feeling that, well, it's my device. It should work. It should work the way that I want it to work. There is the concern that a lot of users don't like having to re-enter their passwords or draw a design on the screen, although recently they've determined that the screen design drawing is too easily predicted, too repetitive. Users do consider it to be a productivity buzzkill, but having your competitors access all of your corporate data assets and beat your company out to market, that's even more of a buzzkill. So be prepared to stand up to that. Finally, given that we have users who are in my age group, anywhere from 40 to 60 or 70 years old, you got to know that you're going to be contending with fat fingers and failing eyesight. So here we are on a small screen. You've got to make it easy for the users to be able to manipulate the buttons, manipulate the controls, enter the data they need to enter readily without a problem, and see the results very vividly without having to strain or zoom or otherwise manipulate the image. All of these have to go into your user design on the front end to make the app as productive as it possibly can be. There are many methods to this madness that we're talking about today. First and foremost, data collected immediately is far more accurate. When you have a service representative who is jotting notes about what they did for the customer at the customer site before they leave, you can be guaranteed they're going to be more comprehensive, more complete, more accurate than they would be if that service representative went back to the office and keyed it in on a console the next evening or the next morning. Data collected immediately, far more accurate. The great news with mobile devices especially is that work can be accomplished literally anywhere, anytime, on a moving conveyance like a train, plane, or automobile, on a beach, poolside, in the park, really at the breakfast table, while everybody else is watching TV. It sounds kind of awful to plot that we're going to get our people to work more for us, but the reality is that people are happy being able to get their work done and get it off their plate when it's convenient for them. And that's great news for everybody. One thing that corporations like about mobile devices especially is that the cost of buying and maintaining client devices is either reduced or completely eliminated when they launch a BYOD initiative. The users themselves, the employees themselves, buy the device, maintain the device, service the device, replace the device, All that the corporation has to do is be sure that they've secured their data on the device and that they are acting in good faith to not destroy or damage the user's own personal data on their own personal device. Also, the connections between users and corporate are improved when people are using their own devices. They can literally call in, reach in, text in, email in. They have multiple different channels that they can use. They can make video calls from the field. The ability to communicate with your colleagues, with your executives, with your suppliers increases dramatically the more and more we see mobile devices rolling out there. And I believe we've only seen the beginning. The most important message to take away from my introductory presentation today is that the race is literally to the swiftest. The faster you can bring your applications to market, the faster you can bring well-designed, effective applications to market, the faster you can bring user-acceptable, user-desirable applications that will be adopted quickly and put right to use to market, the likelier it is that you're going to win the race to being more successful, having incredible strategic advantages, and taking fuller advantage of the growth of mobile devices in our industry. I believe Paul has somebody else with us today who can give you a little more detail on some tool sets, some platforms, and some resources that can help you get all of this done far easier and far more quickly. Paul?
And in fact, we do. Thank you, Howard, for introducing, laying the groundwork, if you will, for the situation users are encountering. We want to hear now from Ken Parmalee, who leads technology and business development strategy for IBM Mobile First software offerings, and also drives product advocacy and ecosystem development for the Mobile First products. Before joining IBM, he was the lead research director for Gartner's Mobile and Client Computing Group. He is also, in his earlier role at Antenna Software, his mobile application team built groundbreaking HTML5 mobile apps and management technologies. So, Ken, it's your turn now.
Thank you very much, Paul. So we really wanted to take a little bit of time to talk not just through kind of technologies, but some things that are going on in the market that really are things you've got to consider as you're making choices about what you do in mobility. So in this particular slide, you're really looking through a set of changes that are starting to affect the market in a big way. And the really key aspect of this, which Howard mentioned, is not only the fact that the backlogs of apps within organizations are growing very rapidly, but that the shift is really occurring in the investment around what companies are doing for applications as well. And part of that is shifting to mobile or, single mobile first type interfaces so that you can get to a variety of mobile devices. But there's also a really significant change that's occurring in the way that people access those applications. And by result, the idea of the web mashup type thing or those kinds of applications are really being spun out into small built-for-purpose applications. And so when you think about that, that's equal to a tremendous number of mobile applications that enterprises are building both internally for their organizations and their own people, but also externally for their clients, for their business partners, to really address the fact that you can get much more speed and productivity by providing these tools, in a mobile-centric kind of way. So when you think about the different approaches to mobility, there are really tend to be focused on a purpose. When you're talking to IT, it tends to be all around security and integration and kind of back-end data synchronization, all the kind of guts or mechanics of doing mobility. When you're talking the line of business, it's obviously completely different. I need an app. I need a set of functionality that I can get into market that will give me business advantage. Or if it's an internal application, it's really all around the fact that I have a certain set of things that I need to make my users able to do remotely and when they can. And so by virtue of that, it's really a focus on features and capabilities instead of the technology to enable it. And the thing that's quite important about this is that when you look at businesses today, their ability to deliver applications outside of their IT organization or even within their IT organization tends to be very restrictive. To hire the number of developers that you would need to clear out all these app requirements for most businesses does not make sense. So today you see a combination of internal development on a smaller scale. You see a lot of external contracting with other vendors to build applications. And what the shift that's really occurring now is starting to create is an instance where companies are hiring more and more developers, setting up their own ability to deliver applications. But in the near term, there's not going to be any kind of lack of need for these applications. So as Howard mentioned before, the ability to keep up with that backlog is just not going to catch up anytime soon. So another key aspect of the mobile world is that there's a lot of technology out there. If you look at the different analyst reports and all the different things that are out there in terms of the types of tools that are available for mobility, there's a wide variety of different capabilities that the market leverages to create apps. And that's everything from cloud services, APIs that I'm using for rich capabilities within an app, to the actual frameworks and dev tools for the client side, to back-end integration pieces, all of the things that are required to deliver a full solution for mobile. And the thing that's quite important to understand about this space is that the things that you need actually change. And we'll talk in a little bit about maturity in the market, but initially, there's a lot of different approaches to take around mobility, and there's a lot of different tools that I might choose to do some of my mobile work, but what you need over time actually changes quite a bit. So the market environment here, as Howard was mentioning, continues to kind of evolve, but the thing that has not, in the last several years, seen any really big significant change really is around the device adoption itself. So Android and iOS still are clearly the kings of this industry. Windows adoption has actually been a lot slower than many expected. And obviously RIM is challenged in most regions, although there are some that still have a pretty good adoption rate. And when you think through how this might change, there's continuing to be an evolution of different OSs and capabilities in the market. Each one brings new challenges and new opportunities. And one of the things in terms of thinking through your mobile strategy is really choosing what kinds of addressable devices you feel like you have to have, and how many users in your particular space are going to be on any one of these platforms. Second, there's a huge demand gap, and this is what we keep saying. 85% of companies have a backlog between 1 and 20 mobile apps. 50% of enterprises have a backlog of 10 to 20 applications. And so when you think through that's a really, really significant measure, because this really only comes down to those organizations that even measure this centrally. When you think through all the different lines of business in an enterprise, that number is likely much larger. But this is just out of a study from IDC that provides for a measure of backlog that they found in typical organizations. In terms of the right approach to mobile, it's quite interesting because in my current role and prior roles as well, I get the question all the time, what is the right way to do mobile? Should I build hybrid? Should I build native? That question is a very, very common question even today. And the answer to that is something that we'll talk about a little bit later. But clearly here, these stats, what they're showing is that companies are not stuck to one technology. They are trying different things in different parts of the organization. Many companies are doing cross-platform type approaches. Many are also doing native, and some are doing quite a bit of mobile web. And it really depends on what kinds of things they're going for and the budgets and their own expertise inside the organization, which mix of things that they're using. And then finally, many enterprises are really debating about what is needed to deliver mobile. And this partly goes to the maturity question I was talking about before, which is early on in mobility, it seems quite easy. And in fact, there's a lot of tools on the market that allow for you to create your client-side application quite easily and in some cases quite rapidly. There's also a lot of different capabilities to connect those things into your enterprise. So that kind of area of, what is really needed to deliver mobile is a constant question too, predominantly by those companies that are early in their stage of mobile development, and that typically means between 1 and 5 applications. So when you think about what companies really typically want, they want to be able to speedily provide for mobile applications, and that means a lot of different things. When you distill down answers you get in this space, it comes down to a few basics, which are, how can I make sure that I can deliver effectively? It's also, how can I make sure that I put things together in a way, and that's both organizationally, with tooling, with processes, to make sure that as I scale up in mobile, I'm effective, I can address needs, I can address complications that may come up, all those kinds of things. So that's one focal area. A second is really, what do I need to support mobile? And this tends to be something that comes up later as companies have done several applications, and that's really quite common for a specific reason, which we'll hit on the next slide. But really, when you look at the things that go into that particular question, it's really around, what is it that's going to affect performance of my applications? How can I make sure they're going to be reliable? How can I make sure that I have the technologies to support handling application updates very rapidly, testing very rapidly, kind of the whole life cycle of mobility, so that I can not only address needs in terms of app requirements and features, but also if there's an OS update that breaks my application, how quickly can I get that out? How quickly can I go through that whole set of things that I need to do to get the application out? And then the third area tends to really be around the developer support that provides for the business needs. And what we hear here commonly, and is the real solid area, is that I don't want my coders to have to build everything. If my guys are building all of their stuff from scratch, not only does it delay my time to market, but it actually greatly impacts the effectiveness of the team, the edginess of the team, and how quickly I can adopt new technologies. It's really a desire to enable the developer, but to enable them with capabilities that allow speed to market, that allow them to rapidly adopt new technologies, and to include business people in that process of delivery of apps as well. And that can include anything from allowing them to be a part of the design process, all the way down to actually allowing them to build applications that then later, I can either extend by development or use for a term period, and then maybe, have developed as a more deep application. So when you think through those areas, as I was talking about before, the thing that comes to bear in all of these slides that I've gone through so far really has to do with maturity of companies. When you think about mobility, there's a stat out there today by Gartner that says that the majority of companies have just moved from a typical 1 to 3 applications to 5 to 8, I believe is the number now. And what that really means is that some companies are only just now starting to feel the strain of what that means in terms of their infrastructure, all of those different communications coming from mobile devices, and not being able to predict what that traffic looks like, how that affects your integration, how that affects performance of the application, all of the things that I already went through in terms of delivering that application effectively and how speedily I can do that. And the fact of the matter is that until you have a few applications, you don't start to feel those pains, because early on in the process, typically, it's more about client side and some basic integration stuff. But the more mobile you do, the more the reality of these fractures, if you will, in what they create starts to come to bear. So when you think through that space, that tipping point between 2 and 3 apps starts to create that impact across your different mobile requirements. And a lot of organizations really start to feel the difficulty even more inherently if the mobile efforts are completely variable, meaning that there's no IT strategy around it. Everybody's kind of building their own stuff with their own tools. And then more specifically, those are going into the back end in different ways, integrating to the systems in different ways, and there's no uniform way of handling the management and the transaction volumes and all those kinds of things. So really, what IBM has done in terms of focus is look at the different types of needs and focus on resolving the issues in those areas. So when you think about IT, when you think about business leaders, that can be anywhere from a chief marketing officer to someone in a line of business, people who are focused both on external and internal applications. They're going to use a variety of different people to build applications. Sometimes they're going to build their own apps. Many times they're going to use partners. And in all of those application requirements, the common themes that really come out are the need to speed and provide edge to their applications. Where you're talking about consumer apps, and this is something that Howard mentioned as well, you want to be able to adopt new technologies very rapidly because that gives you an edge in the market. It gives you more unique experience. It also many times provides for new facets of capability that you couldn't have delivered on your own. And so in this area, IBM has focused on providing app templates as part of Mobile First Platform, vertical solutions as well. We also have services around creating the design itself through IBM Interactive. And then we also have different councils that provide for that inherent knowledge internal to IBM for this specific set of users. And really the thing that's important to understand about those things is we take a focus of how can we not only speed the ability to deliver applications, but in this space what's key is that the user experience is high-end, that it tends to be very cutting edge, and that I am establishing a means to consistently update and keep up with new features of applications because, as I said, it's most critical in this particular area. When I talk about IT leaders, it's mostly about reusability. It's about predictability. It's about making sure I can scale and that I'm secure. So in those areas, typically, they are more concerned about making sure that there is repeatability, lowering of cost, and those kinds of things as a part of their focus. And so in those areas, we provide for, obviously, a lot of software technology, but there's also quite a bit of different training and things that IBM makes available for our clients, because obviously mobile for many companies is either a very new area or an area that they could improve a great amount on. And so in this area, there's a lot of different options for customers to get information on the right way to build mobile applications, how to speed innovation, how to make sure that you're secure, and all those types of things. And then finally, in the developers area, this area is really quite interesting because when you think about it, I mean, obviously developers have the most specific focus on creating apps. But as this space matures, developers are looking to expand their knowledge and also to provide more depth of capability in their own focus areas. And so it's really driven out of just the client-side development into how do I also perform integration? How do I also handle any kind of middleware scripting or any of that kind of stuff I need to do? How do I integrate to cloud technologies? And all of those things are important to developers because not only does it allow them to do their job much more rapidly, but it also allows them to branch into other areas that are higher value, where the client-side development continues to be commoditized more and more day by day. And so in that space, we really are focused on a number of different things, including being very heavily involved in the open source community, committing lots of code and capabilities out to the market through those memberships. And a lot of that really directly goes back into the core foundations of those open communities. So IBM contributes a lot into Cordova and a number of other areas which provide for direct value for any person, whether they buy IBM technology or not. We also seek to really provide a lot of experience for developers in how to create mobile applications, how to design mobile applications. And this is for anybody either coming from an adjacency like web development or brand new to mobile, or a depth of skill on the mobile development side as well, because many of the mobile developers in the market today actually have not had any of that enterprise experience. So they're very used to client-side development, but not how you get into the back ends and how you make sure it's secure and all that kind of thing. And then finally, how you consume is very key to this industry as well. There is a very, very high correlation to products that are flexible and products that provide for the tooling you need and how open they are. And by that, we're really referring to the fact that developers need to be able to access and use these technologies freely, and then work on the other parts of what they need through the different kinds of SDKs and APIs and those kinds of things available to them. That is the model that IBM has followed as well, and that's for many, many reasons. But the biggest is, if you can't try it, how do you know it works effectively for your organization? And then in terms of how you consume, the options of on-cloud or on-premise or some kind of hybrid model between, and how you pay for them also are quite key in the mobile and cloud space as well. And IBM provides for experiences in all these different places. So when you look at the needs of the business, really what it comes down to is as we said before, speed. And so when I think about that speed, one way to get it is to take applications that are off the shelf, that are pre-built, that allow me to rapidly get to other capabilities that I want to do, whether it be enhancement of that application or rebranding of that application, whatever that's equal to. And so IBM has invested a whole lot of money in our Ready Apps program, which is integrated to the Mobile First platform. And what that means is I can take these off-the-shelf applications and I can use them immediately, or I can use them as a base for an app that I'm going to build. And we have apps in many different industries, healthcare, insurance, many other industries that our clients can use. Second are the Mobile First for iOS apps, and these are through our Apple partnership. These are transformative type of solutions, and these are really meant to help our clients start those time to value apps very rapidly, and they're really focused primarily on internal applications and B2E type applications that I would want to get out for my consumers, for my business partners, those types of apps. Collaborative prototyping, as I mentioned before, is becoming a very significant part of mobile development. And this is because of the point I was making around business users being involved in the process. So rather than, the old days of a business user sits down, talks through a ton of requirements, a designer comes back with some kind of look and feel, and then you iterate back and forth. Collaborative prototyping really allows for the business person without technical skill to quickly kind of create applications, provide them to the developer, have brief conversations, work back and forth until we have the right experience. And so you're actively working on the application as opposed to just a bunch of mock-ups that then have to be redeveloped for the purpose of the application. And then the third area is really leveraging partners that enable me to do applications at speed. So all of us have had the experience of, I really can't invest the time or have the resources to build a certain application. And so by virtue of a strong partner community, IBM can extend to our clients the ability to rapidly have the applications created and get them into market. And those are based on our mobile first technology, which means that they're scalable. And at any point in time when a company wants to take over their own management, maintenance, extension of those applications, you can do it with the same technology, so you know exactly what you're getting, how extensible it is, and all those kinds of things just by virtue of that. So we wanted to take a moment to talk about what it means to build, integrate, and scale. When you think about the application, as I mentioned before, the app itself, while there's a ton of focus put in that space, it's actually the most commodity part of building the mobile solution. Client side is actually quite simple to develop. Many developers could build an application within a few days, a few weeks, and put that out into the market. But that is not equal to something that will perform, that does not have security risks and all those kinds of things. And so whether you build a native hybrid HTML5 or use some kind of framework, there is still a consistent need underlying all of those requirements that really is around security, around the ability to continuously improve or iterate on applications, and part of that is addressing things that may come up in terms of security risks or new OS vulnerabilities, all those kinds of things. And then the ability to really contextualize and personalize apps, this is really becoming more and more the forefront of mobility. More users are looking for their information, their preferences, the experience oriented towards what they want to do, as opposed to a generalized app that just gives me everything and then notifications that, bother me continuously. And then finally, all these things need to integrate into back ends. Part of the highest value of mobility is that I'm getting some very unique data that otherwise I couldn't get, and that's anything related to behavior on the device within my application, how people interact with my apps, even how people interact in a physical location, per their mobile device. And so these areas are really not only the forefront and the required areas, but they're the things that consistently across any mobile application have relevance today, and those are part of the Mobile First platform. I can consume Mobile First on-premise or in the cloud, or in a hybrid environment if I wish. And the thing that's key about that is, depending on the maturity of an organization, I may not want to take on maintenance of these technologies, or I may want to have it all internal because I've got key constituencies or security concerns that don't allow for me to put stuff in the cloud. But this model allows me to actually move back and forth between the cloud at will, so whenever I want. And then finally, the integration via APIs in the back end is also critical, because that allows for me to really leverage those back-end systems and the data I have to the fullest extent, as well as write back new data that I've never collected before into systems around relevance and use and those kinds of things I've talked about before. A key aspect of this, and why architecture is important in the mobile space, is that mobile apps and cloud apps are much more chatty and bursty than prior applications. When you could the days you could sit on your laptop or your desktop and wait for a download or, shovel large parts of data one way or the other are gone. With a mobile device, I'm loosely connected at best, and I need to be able to manage that data flow. I need to be able to manage the way that all of that occurs in a way that is specific, and that also does not cause problems in my infrastructure as all of that traffic occurs. There's some great stories around companies who launched big mobile app efforts, in Black Friday scenarios, and just, the performance of their application got crushed. They lost tons of transactions, and it's a basic thing. With mobile, you don't necessarily have the same level of control over when and where people access your data, and so you've got to have that in mind as you make these things available in market. So if I really think now about the different kinds of capabilities, we need the security and trust. We have to have enterprise integration, and we have to have the ability to manage those applications. And there's a lot that goes into these different areas, and I'm going to consume these different capabilities in different ways. Some of it is just basic need for all apps. Some of it is rich additional capabilities that I might want to consume from the cloud for a specific purpose. Maybe I want to add in mobile analytics, for example, that give me more data about how people are moving and using the application. Or maybe I want to use a specific set of kind of messaging services or something like that. Those things are easily consumed from the cloud and from Bluemix, our cloud platform, alongside your mobile application written in Mobile First. And the reason that's key is, as we said, there's a level of things that are not variable and pretty much every app needs, but then there's a lot of variability in the individual features and how I put them into an application. And leveraging Bluemix as an example of cloud services gives me some speed to provide rich capabilities into the app that otherwise I'd have to hand code and build on my own. So the evolution of this industry has really vastly changed. 2012, people were really looking at how do I develop the app once and run across a broad range of devices and OSs. And it's not that that's not still important, but the focus of businesses have moved beyond that. When you get into the last couple years, it was really focused around making an app enterprise ready. And that's a lot of the aspects that we've been talking about before. Is it going to scale? If I get hit with volumes of traffic, what's going to happen? Is it secure? Do I know how it's working? Am I going to get notified if there's some kind of issue with my mobile experience? But really, we've moved into a new age with mobile apps, and it's really now that those things are available via technology, those two earlier areas. What I need to do is focus on how my apps are better and how I can make them cutting edge so that I can achieve the most benefit out of mobile. I'm making the investment and I have limited resources, so why would I kind of take a lower end kind of set of capabilities that don't allow me to scale and change over time rapidly? And so in this area, the universal problems really come down to performance, because we all know those bad apps, we don't want to keep them on our device. We try them. If they really don't seem to work correctly, we get rid of them. And that's very, very difficult to overcome in your consumer space in particular. Second is really security, and this is in any application, and it goes back to the point Howard was making. If I'm putting any kind of enterprise data in or taking any kind of valuable data out of the mobile device, security is not even a question. It's just a requirement. Third is really the context and personalization we talked about before. So more and more the expectation is that when I go to an app or when I get a notification, that it's going to be something centered around my interests or the things that I'm doing or where I am, those kinds of things, as opposed to just the generalized notifications. In the early days of mobile devices, I couldn't go app by app and shut off all my notifications. Now, if an app chats too much with me and gives me these crazy offers that I'm not interested in, I'm either going to take the app off the device or I'm going to shut off the notifications, and then that channel for you is gone in terms of advertising. So it's key that you start to think about how you contextualize and personalize applications, even if you're not there today. And then that back-end data source issue is consistent, because it's not just about moving the data back and forth. It's making sure that there's consistency in that data. It's making sure that I know if there's some kind of issue with a particular back end, and that's all the way from the device all the way through to the back end. And as technologies change in this space, that just gets to be even more and more simple to do, but the complexity remains that you can't just assume that the data is going to get where it goes. So when I think through the different kinds of development, and this goes to the question I was saying before, there's not a one answer fits all. When I'm talking about the client side, it depends on what kind of application I'm trying to produce and what the outcome it needs to be. Many times, hybrid or HTML5 really give me all that I need for an application, particularly internally, and that gives me the multi-channel cross-device capability as well. So that's a great answer. But a lot of times I need native capabilities, whether that be because it's got to be high-end user experience or it's got to integrate to device capabilities that are really better handled performance-wise through a native application. And so really you have to look case by case at the application, what the requirements of that application are, and rather than focus on kind of we're going to do this way for all applications, which is a mistake, I need to be thinking through what are the things that are required and allow for the greatest good for the application. In many regions of the world, simple applications through SMS and USSD still fit the bill, and that's not true, of course, of Europe or the U.S., but if you have a global company, saying that I'm going to build this high-end native app, will literally cut you out of a huge amount of the market if you don't kind of look at it overall. So really the thing to understand here is that Mobile First provides for a capability to leverage any of these types of development, any kind of framework, any third-party development facility, but still provide that consistent set of security, integration, monitoring capabilities that we were talking about before that give the value of mobile. So we're going to kind of skip through some of these slides because we're running out of time, but the big things that we continually see from our clients as questions are really how do I handle all these different things? Like context and personalization, for example, is not simply done. Getting to the ability to deliver apps rapidly and at pace is also not easily done. And so I need to be able to do these things, and I don't have the ability to spend years kind of scaling up to it. And those are the consistent themes, and these quotes are actually from some clients that we've talked to in the past. So there are two different ways to kind of approach this. The most rapid way, obviously, to get to a lot of capabilities is really to try and consume as much as I can from the cloud. But that doesn't always fit what I need to do. Many banks and regulated industries cannot take that approach. And so I've got to get to cloud services, in some cases, and in other cases I've got to get to on-prem. And then what we're seeing more and more is that many companies want to consume in a hybrid mode. For mission-critical stuff, they want to have it on-premise. For things that are more edgy and more oriented towards the new stuff that they're trying to do, they want to consume from the cloud. They want to be able to stand up things and take them down very rapidly in test scenarios and that type of thing. And so the ability to do that as you get more into mobile becomes more and more important. And where we would tell you the leaders in the market are going in terms of consumers are really centered around that ability to do both and in whatever combination they want. Obviously that provides for a lot of different cost-cutting capabilities in terms of not getting into long-term investment, but it also allows for me to do a lot of testing, a lot of variable kinds of environments for special purposes and not have the long-term costs. So we're going to skip through the next couple slides just to kind of get to some key aspects here. So when I think about the unique capabilities that the clients are trying to get to, and this maps very directly to the three challenges we talked to before, we really needed, most companies are really looking for the ability to empower more people to be involved in the process of mobility. This is everything from getting them the ability to do rich data from their applications, meaning that I can get more to the device, get it from the device, and do it intelligently. It also is around that mix of more productivity and better experience. And then third is really around more of the taking out the risk kinds of stuff. And so in each of those areas, IBM has focused a very, very deep layer of technology in the Mobile First platform to not only ensure that you can build the app, but that as I've got the apps out there, I can make sure that I've got the security I need and that I've got the experience that I need. I've got the data retrieval from the device that's unique that I can get, and that I know that the data is going to and from the device as needed. So we wanted to talk a bit about how we do this too. So there's a number of different services that we provide for our clients that allow us to do anything from provide for an immersive experience for our clients to learning experiences for our clients. And so this really takes you through a different level of kind of different ways to engage in mobility. And this is whether you use Mobile First or not. We have learning in our Bluemix garages. We have learning facilities for the different kind of architectural strategies to take as well. So all of these provide for a deep layer of capability for anyone who's new to mobile. Finally, I wanted to kind of get in briefly to some of the different lab capabilities we've got, and this really goes to where you are in that maturity curve that we talked about before. I really need to start out with how I plan then how I move into succeeding with the application, and then how I scale. And the labs can actually provide for that end-to-end capability regardless of where you are in your maturity level for mobile. So the focus here is really to make sure that any app that you put out is successful and provides for everything you need it to. And this is also a service that we provide to our customers, whether you're mobile first or not. Finally, we wanted to kind of touch on where we're going in terms of mobility. And this is not an IBM point of view. This is really where the industry is going. The digitization of human experience. And what that really means is that the more I'm interacting with devices of any kind, whether that be IoT or tablets or mobile phones, any kind of thing that is enabled, I am collecting more data and I'm doing more with it. And so what's going to continue to drive a lot of the edge of mobility tends to be around the ideas that I need to blend that digital experience with what I do physically in my environment, whether that's using tracking mechanisms so that I actually care about so that I can get a better experience, or that's all the way down to just how I interact with a physical thing. The second is really around highly personalized experience. The third is really around empowering wider sets of people to do development, even when they're non-developers. And then finally, really get rich insight to that data, which is a challenge today. So with that, we wanted to turn it over to questions. We don't have much time, but hopefully that's very helpful to you all. And then, Paul, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Ken. And I believe that we're over time, so I think we're going to have to go without questions this particular event. I do want to tell our listeners about some great resources that IBM is providing through their IBM MSP portal, through PivotPoint, the IBM news site that is devoted to all kinds of hot technology topics, following on Twitter and LinkedIn, all ways that you can learn more about IBM Mobile First and what it's doing to enable the mobile application process to be smoother from soup to nuts. That is, however, all the time we have today, so I would like to thank Howard and Ken for joining us. There will be an archived version of this webcast available shortly. You should watch your inbox for a notification of when that archive is available, and we hope you'll share it with your colleagues. There's a brief survey that should be popping up on your screen right about now. Please fill it out to help us continually improve our webcasts, and we hope to see all of you at future Quinn Street webcasts. For now, though, this is Paul Gillen signing off. On behalf of today's sponsor, IBM, thanks for joining us, and have a great day.